Hello, friends! In a world where faces may seem familiar and intentions appear clear, hidden within the smallest of details lie stories none could ever imagine. When trust meets betrayal, love intertwines with jealousy, and reason collides with crime, the balance is overturned, giving rise to tales that surpass the bounds of fiction. This story is not just an incident, it's a deep dive into the human psyche, where desires clash with principles and greed drives people to tragic ends. What happens when someone meant to be a role model becomes the greatest threat? The crime dates back to 2013, but the story itself begins in 2004. The central figure in our story is Wael, a young man just starting his life, from Egypt, living in Asyut Governorate, specifically in the city of Abu Tig. As soon as he graduated, he began working as a teacher, specializing in psychology, at one of the most well-known schools in Asyut. He quickly stood out in his field, and was able to prove himself within a short period. All the teachers who worked with him at the same school saw him as extremely successful. During his time there, he was also pursuing a master's degree in psychology, driven by his deep passion for the subject and his curiosity about the hidden layers of the human soul. He was very noticeable, as his brilliance and achievements hinted at a promising future. Among those who admired him was a colleague named Hanan, a beautiful and respectable teacher praised by all her peers. In a short time, mutual admiration developed between Wael and Hanan, and gradually, their relationship evolved until Wael proposed to her and asked for her hand in marriage. Hanan agreed quickly because she saw him as someone truly special. They married soon after, supported and celebrated by both families, who deeply respected and appreciated one another. From the beginning of their marriage, Hanan was determined to support Wael and help him succeed even further. She stood by him throughout his master's studies. The people of Asyut loved teacher Wael so much that they constantly asked him to tutor their children privately. For Wael, this was a great way to increase his income, and Hanan was very encouraging of this path. However, once the money started flowing into his hands, signs of greed began to emerge. He realized that the time he was wasting moving from house to house for private lessons could be used more effectively. So, he made an agreement with one of the educational centers in Asyut to make it his fixed location for giving lessons. This way, students would come to him based on a schedule he organized himself. As a result, his income increased significantly. Over time, Wael's routine became as follows. He would finish his official work, return home for just 1 hour, then head out to spend the rest of the day at the educational center. This arrangement began to bother Hanan, as Wael was no longer truly present in her life or in the lives of their children. Nevertheless, she remained silent. After they had children, expenses increased, and Wael constantly justified his long absences by claiming he was doing it all to provide a better life for them. Years passed, and by 2008, Hanan discovered that Wael was involved with several other women. She realized that much of the time he claimed to spend it at the educational center was, in fact, spent elsewhere. She had strong evidence that he was engaged in multiple romantic relationships. Strangely enough, due to his expertise in psychology, Wael managed to manipulate Hanan into feeling guilty. He turned the tables on her, making her believe that the problem was hers, that she had become too focused on the children and had stopped giving him any attention. Hanan began to feel that she was the one who had made a mistake. But after she woke up from that illusion and began thinking logically, she came up with an idea that could bring balance for everyone, something that would satisfy her, Wael, and the children alike. The idea was for all of Wael's lessons and professional life to take place in one location, their own home. Hanan began searching for a spacious ground-floor apartment with the intention of dividing it, one part for their family to live in, and the other part to be converted into a private educational center, where he could receive his students under her full supervision and within her sight. When she presented the idea to Wael, he had no valid reason to reject it. He agreed and followed through with the plan. After a full year of living in the ground-floor apartment and converting part of it into Wael's private educational center, everything seemed to be going smoothly. However, over time, a new issue began to surface. The number of students started increasing rapidly, which led to logistical challenges in accommodating them, managing appointments, and coordinating schedules. This made it necessary to hire someone to manage the scheduling and student accounts in collaboration with Wael. And this is where the beautiful secretary entered the picture, tasked with organizing all of Whale's work and even living with them in the same apartment. Naturally, this arrangement appeared reasonable to outsiders, given that the educational center was part of the home. The truth, however, was that this secretary had been in a relationship with Whale for 7 years, something Hannon had absolutely no knowledge of. Due to the secretary's close proximity to Whale, she was well informed about every aspect of his life, from his financial earnings to the problems he had with his wife. Their relationship was not an ordinary one, nor just a fleeting emotional affair. It was an illicit and long-standing entanglement. As for Hannon, she naturally felt jealous of the secretary. But she never imagined that the relationship between her husband and this woman had reached such a deeply involved level. Years passed until we arrive at March 2013. One day, Hannon was sitting at home as usual when she suddenly began receiving a series of romantic messages from an unknown number that wasn't saved in her phone. As the days went by, the messages continued to increase. Every time she tried calling the number, it was always switched off. When Whale returned home and saw the messages himself, he created a huge scene and accused Hannon of having an affair. He then took her phone and tried calling the number several times in front of her, but the phone was still switched off every time. Just 2 days later, the messages started coming again, but this time, they were more explicit. The sender now claimed to be in an illicit relationship with Hannon. This infuriated Whale, and he started another intense fight with her, which eventually drove Hannon to leave the house and go stay with her family. A week later, the couple reconciled, and everything returned not only to normal, but even better than before. Whale promised Hannon that he would never doubt her again and assured her that it was fully confident in her integrity and kind nature. A whole month passed in complete calm and great stability, without any issues between Whale and Hannon, until that day came. Whale woke up at exactly 7 in the morning, as usual, got dressed, and headed to his school. Hannon was expected to wake up shortly after to go to her own job. At around 8 in the morning, their 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, happened to wake up, although it wasn't her usual time. She assumed both her parents had already left for work, but something strange caught her attention. The key to the front door, the one her mother usually used, was still in the lock on the inside. That meant her mother had not left the house. She was still inside. Sarah walked toward the bedroom and found her mother lying on the bed with a wet cloth stuffed in her mouth. Her mother's appearance was extremely unsettling. Her body was covered in blue bruises, and the room was in complete disarray, as if things had been deliberately thrown on the floor. Sarah tried several times to wake her mother, but quickly realized that she wasn't moving and that her condition was far from normal. In a state of panic and shock, she immediately called her father. Whale answered from the school, but couldn't believe what he was hearing. He told her to call her grandmother immediately, while he rushed out of school and headed home. Sarah did as she was told and, at the same time, woke up her younger brother, whom she found sleeping in an unusual spot. When he woke up, he told her that he had gotten up earlier and saw their father standing in the middle of the apartment, acting completely normal. Their father had asked him to check on their mother and then told him to go back to sleep since it was still early. At almost the same moment, their grandmother received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar and distorted. The caller told her he had killed her daughter and demanded a ransom of 50,000 Egyptian pounds, threatening that if she didn't pay, he would kill both of her grandchildren, and Whale as well. He then hung up and turned off the phone immediately. Whale arrived home and quickly notified the authorities, informing them that his wife had been murdered. Security forces moved quickly, accompanied by a team of forensic experts, and upon arrival, it was clear they were dealing with a carefully planned murder and robbery. Several details at the crime scene stood out to investigators. 1. There were no visible signs of forced entry on the apartment's doors or windows. Since the family lived on the ground floor, this suggested that the perpetrator had entered in a normal, non-violent manner. 2. The house key was still inside the door, indicating that Hannon herself had opened it and likely did not expect any danger. 3. There were clear strangulation marks on Hannon's neck, as well as the wet cloth found in her mouth. 4. All of her gold jewelry was missing, and the money that had been in her handbag and wardrobe was stolen. It was evident that whoever committed The crime was highly organized, meticulous, and deliberate in execution. In addition to that, forensic experts managed to find a strange fingerprint in multiple locations, inside the apartment. After the crime scene investigation was completed, Hanen's body was sent to the Forensic Medical Authority, and security forces immediately launched a full investigation, collecting evidence and taking witness statements. As for the robbery, it seemed logical, since Mr. Whale was well known in the area and recognized as a wealthy man who kept cash at home on a daily basis. During the investigation, while Whale was giving his testimony, he insisted that he didn't suspect anyone in particular, and stated that neither he nor his wife had any known enemies. However, he did mention something unusual. A strange number had been sending messages to his wife. The number was always switched off, and the content of the messages, according to him, was disturbing. The investigators sensed an indirect suggestion in Whale's words, that his wife might have been involved with someone, potentially linking this unknown person to the crime. This hint was documented carefully, and Whale continued his testimony, stating that he left the house at 7 a.m., stopped by a bakery to buy bread, then went to a gas station, and finally arrived at his school, where he stayed until he received the call from his daughter. Security officers continued gathering information, and it became evident that Whale and Hanan had ongoing marital conflicts. Several people testified to witnessing arguments between the couple. When Hanan's phone was examined, they did indeed find romantic messages from an unknown number. At this point, investigators formed several task forces with one goal: to solve the mystery of the crime and identify the person behind the strange fingerprint found in the house. The forensic report arrived. It revealed that Hanan had taken a dose of sedatives shortly before her death. A fracture was found in her neck bone due to intense pressure, indicating strangulation as the direct cause of death. Although traces of water were found from the wet cloth in her mouth, this was determined not to be the cause of death. It appeared to have been inserted after she had died. Soap residue was also found on Hanan's hand, suggesting that the killer used a lubricant to remove her jewelry more easily. This led the investigators to conclude that the perpetrator had acted with calmness, focus, and extreme precision. At the same time, the list of stolen items was completed. It showed that 1,000 Egyptian pounds had been stolen from Hanan's purse, in addition to several gold accessories, all of which were catalogued in detail in the investigation report. The most important clue came from 9-year-old Sarah, the first to discover the crime. During her interview, she told the investigators that her mother, Hanan, was often jealous of the secretary. At that point, suspicions toward Whale were reinforced. Security officers had already suspected that he was directly involved, despite how convincingly he portrayed sorrow and emotional collapse in front of others. The first step the investigators took was to verify Hanan's reputation and conduct a comprehensive background check. It was confirmed that she was not involved in any illicit relationship. Additionally, the number that had been sending her messages had never been used for any purpose other than those specific texts. More disturbingly, the same number had sent a message to Hanan on the day of the crime, and it matched the number used to call the grandmother afterward, threatening to kill the children and Whale if 50,000 pounds wasn't paid. This number, too, was found to be switched off and had only been used for that one call, suggesting that a carefully planned operation was underway. The security team decided to retrace Whale's steps on the day of the crime to verify his statements. They found that while he had indeed gone to the places he mentioned, some strange behavior stood out. At the bakery, he initiated a quarrel with people waiting in line, complaining about the quality of the bread. At the gas station, he also caused a scene by skipping the line, claiming he was late for school. At school, for the first time ever, he treated his colleagues to juice. Although Whale was known to be wealthy, he had a reputation for being stingy. Such behavior was highly uncharacteristic. All these signs confirmed to investigators that Whale was deliberately trying to leave an impression at each place he visited, by starting arguments or creating noticeable moments so people would remember his presence, especially since he was well known in the area. Eventually, the investigators confirmed that Whale had an illicit relationship with the secretary. A detailed investigation into his call history revealed that on the day of the crime, at exactly 7:15 a.m., he made a phone call to a man named Mohammed Khalaf, a car mechanic. The timing and nature of the call raised suspicions, prompting investigators to dig into Mohammed Khalaf's background, and they discovered that he had a criminal record. Wael was confronted with this information. Signs of tension began to appear on him, but he maintained remarkable self-control and claimed that he had simply called Mohammed in the morning because he was planning to stop by after school to have some repairs done on his car. While that might seem reasonable, the investigators decided to place Wael under close surveillance. Simultaneously, a security unit was dispatched to arrest Mohammed Khalaf, and as soon as he saw the officers, he confessed immediately. He admitted that he had committed the crime and stated that everything had been planned by Mr. Wael. Mohammed was arrested, and his fingerprints were compared to the ones found at the crime scene. They were an exact match. When the officers confronted Wael with this, he denied everything. He claimed he knew nothing about Mohammed Khalaf, beyond his work as a car mechanic, and insisted he had no connection to the crime. At that moment, Mohammed Khalaf shocked everyone. He had recorded all the phone calls between him and Wael, and even filmed all their meetings. The recordings revealed what had happened 4 months prior to the crime. At that time, the relationship between Wael and his secretary was still ongoing. But at one point, she told him she could no longer continue in that relationship and demanded that he choose between her and his wife, Hanan. Because Wael was Christian, he couldn't divorce Hanan or legally marry the secretary. So he made a chilling decision to get rid of his wife in order to marry the secretary. That's when the planning for the murder began, a process that took 4 full months. The first step was buying a new SIM card and sending romantic messages to Hanan, making it appear as though she was having an affair. His goal was to redirect suspicion away from himself once the crime was committed. The second step was a trip to a mountainous region in Asyut known for harboring outlaws, individuals who don't hesitate to commit crimes. But due to Wael's stinginess and the small amount he offered in exchange for his wife's murder, they refused to even consider his request. After failing there, Wael looked for another route. During this period, he convinced Hanan that she was suffering from insomnia and needed sleeping pills. He even persuaded her to go to the pharmacy herself and purchase them. Meanwhile, he continued his search for someone to carry out the murder until he coincidentally met Mohammed Khalaf, who was dealing with severe financial issues. They sat down for a conversation, during which Wael made a strange offer to kill the wife of a friend. Wael never said it was his wife, but due to Mohammed's criminal background, which Wael was unaware of, he quickly suspected that the intended victim was indeed Wael's wife. So, he secretly recorded everything. However, Mohammed didn't do this out of moral obligation or a desire to inform the authorities. His goal was blackmail. He planned to hold on to the recordings, wait a while, and then threaten Wael to extract money from him. But to his surprise, Wael had already made up his mind and wanted the murder to be carried out immediately. They agreed on a payment of 2,000 Egyptian pounds, and Wael confessed that the target was indeed his wife, Hanan. He also promised to give Mohammed all the gold jewelry she would be wearing that day, along with additional gold from the wardrobe, which Wael himself would retrieve and hand over. On the day of the crime, Wael called Mohammed at 6:15 a.m., met him in the street, and personally led him into the house. He directed him to the bedroom, where his wife was sleeping. Mohammed entered the room, with Wael following behind, carrying a wet cloth. Wael asked Mohammed to strangle her, but as Mohammed looked closer, he noticed extensive blue bruises all over Hanan's body, and that the cloth wasn't having any effect. He began to suspect that she was already dead. At that moment, Mohammed believed he bore no criminal responsibility, as he hadn't technically killed her. So he stole 1,000 pounds from her purse and took the gold from the wardrobe. When they struggled to remove the gold jewelry from her hands, Wael asked Mohammed to get a bar of soap from the bathroom to help slide the jewelry off more easily from the hands of his own wife. While they were committing the crime, Wael's son woke up. Wael quickly hid Mohammed and greeted his son with disturbing calmness. He even told the boy to check on his mother, who by then was a lifeless body, then instructed him to go back to bed because it was still early. After everything was done, Wael asked Mohammed to leave and waited for him at a distant location. Then, Wael went about his day, visiting the bakery, the gas station, and the school, strategically leaving a trail in every place to prove he wasn't at home when the crime occurred. Once he finished his errands, he met up with Muhammad and gave him the SIM card to use in calling Whale's mother-in-law, threatening her that her daughter had been killed and demanding £50,000. At the same time, Whale used a second SIM card to continue sending romantic messages to his late wife's phone, maintaining the illusion of an affair even after her death. After lengthy trials and multiple failed attempts by Whale to prove his innocence, the verdict was issued in 2016. Both Whale and Muhammad Khalaf were sentenced to death. And so, one of the most chilling cases, marked by betrayal and cold-blooded planning, by manipulation and performance, by fake love and hidden hatred, came to a close. This crime wasn't a sudden act of rage. It was the result of months of deceit, born from infidelity, fed by greed, and ending in innocent bloodshed. Justice ultimately spoke. But one haunting question remains. How many of the faces we see every day hide deadly secrets behind polite smiles? And is the law alone enough to protect lives from the malice of the human soul? This was our story, dear friends. I hope it captivated you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to stay updated. See you in the next story.